Then we can try to reflect, contemplate, and feel life is too short to argue, fight, and have negative feeling with each other. Instead, in such short life, we should try to cultivate as much positive feelings, loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, and trying to be helpful and help each other as much as possible. If we are able to do that, when the time comes for us to leave this world, we will have less regret and more joy, satisfaction with ourselves. As well as that will affect the futures of the dead. To have a better and higher rebirth and experiences in the futures. And in order to live our life on that kind of, on the basis of such understandings, principle, value, we need to practice as much as possible in our everyday life. Through reflection, contemplation, meditations. And for that, we need to be reminded all the time. And again, that is why we have come together to be reminded of the importance of such practices. And having been reminded, then trying to apply and integrate as much as possible in our everyday life. And may all the activities that we engage in our 24 hours, weeks, months, year, through all our life, especially us coming here together, become cause and conditioned to obtain the fully awakened state as soon as possible. So we can be much more greater benefit and help to each and every sentient being. Okay, so then we can have the prayer. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the fourth destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teachers of God and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdued from Shakya claim, I prostrate, make offering, go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms Adam in all expect. With the supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. Thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberrations, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, and a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see condition, things as such. To this may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the samsaric portions, perturbed by the weight of aging, sickness, and death. So shibe ge zhong xin me do da re ra le yin de yin ba de dang ge xin do yi de wo wa do gun na da xin Idam Guru Rana Mandala I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit I create relation to the Dharma, may I become Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chodan Soge Sonam La Changyo Pado Dame Sagi Choge Ge Sonam Ge Dola Pente Sangye Dola Sangye Chodan Soge Sonam La Changyo Pado Dame Sagi Choge Ge Sonam Dola Pente Sangye Dola Kanje Doja Nizone Tawa Tamche Pame Tambe Chune Tenye Kodam De La Chao. So if we kind of summarize all the Buddha's teachings, maybe it might be okay to say that all the Buddha's teachings are given in order to reduce and overcome all our selfish attitude and self-grasping ignorance. Because the selfish attitude and the self-grasping ignorance is the very root of our conflict, our problems, and source of our pain, suffering, miserable, and as well as that lead us to be harmful, hurtful, and create more pain and suffering to others as well. And so all the Buddha's teaching in one way to reduce and eliminate that. On the other hand, all the teachings are given in order to in order for us to cultivate and develop a sense of cherishing thought for others through loving kindness, compassion, both in the mind and the wisdom, realizing the ultimate truth or reality. And again, the reason why we need to cultivate those, such as sense of loving concern and loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta and wisdom, is because those are the source of our temporary happiness, ultimate happiness, as well as those inner qualities help us to be more, to bring more, to be able to help and benefit others in whatever way we can, according to our own individual capacity at different stages of our path. In certain stages, we are able to more. In some situations, in certain stages, we are able to do less. But according to our circumstances, according to our abilities and situations, that we are able to be more service, more help, more benefit to the society, to the other sentient beings, thereby reduce the pain and suffering of others, helping to reduce the pain and suffering of others, and helping to increase the happiness of others, temporary happiness, ultimate happiness, and so therefore that. And so again, the Lojong practice, the 7 point of mind training that we have been going through, focus on that, focus on that. And then in terms of that, as I mentioned, there are many different meditations in order to cultivate and maintain and increase and improve, such as loving kindness, compassion, the bodhicitta, the mind, and the wisdom. One of the main powerful practice or the meditations to generate loving kindness, compassion, to increase and improve and bodhicitta, the mind, is the practice of Tonglen, taking and giving, that we talked about last week. And also we did some practice as well at the end of the sessions on Tonglen. The Tonglen practice can be practiced every day, and especially when we are dealing with our own problems, when we are dealing with our own challenges, difficulties. If we do the Tonglen practice, it helps us to direct our attentions, our mind, our attentions towards the suffering and pain of others, instead of being so obsessed with our own pain and problem and sufferings. Through the practice of Tonglen, it helps us to direct our mind towards others' pain and challenges and difficulties, and to be able to feel and understand their pain and sufferings. And when we are able to do that, then our own pain gets reduced, because we are not so obsessed with that. The more we become so obsessed with our own pain and problem, then it becomes much more unbearable. we feel much more bigger. That problem, it feels much more bigger than it is. But when we are able to kind of open our mind and direct that our attentions, our mind, our awareness towards understandings, not only our own suffering and pain, but towards others' pain and suffering, then you don't feel so unbearable or so big or so unmanageable of your own pain or suffering. So again, it helps us to, so in that way, and utilizing our own pain and suffering to open our mind to understand others' pain and suffering, and thereby making our pain and suffering cause to develop our own inner growth of loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind, and through that we transform that way, so we can do that. And of course, as we mentioned yesterday, sometimes when we see and when we see the pain and sufferings of others, of course, if there is something that we can actually engage in to reduce the pain and suffering, and definitely we try to do that. We try to do that as much as possible in terms of, but not only that, then we can also try to do that online practice while we in actions, indirectly, where we are trying to reduce their pain and suffering in whatever way we can contribute and be helped. At the same time, we try to also do the tonglen, taking whatever they're suffering and pain through the practice and giving them all the solutions, all the joy, all the happiness, and especially, in a situation where we are unable to really do much in terms of, directly, then again, that we can do the practice of tonglen can be very helpful, can be very helpful. Mm. And as we mentioned before, so yeah, we can do that. And if we are doing that as the actual practice in our everyday life, then definitely, in our meditation practice, first we start with someone who is very dear to close to us, where it's more easier, and then we expand that to more kind of strangers, and then we extend it to someone, whether we call it enemy or not, but someone we have more difficult challenges, and then we expand to all sentient beings. And so that is how we try to do that online practice, if we do it every day in that. And then of course in certain special situations, then we can just focus on that one individual, whether it's your own pain or whether it's pain with others in that particular situation, that then we can just focus in that. But normally when we do as a general practice, then we just try to do that way, as I mentioned, starting with dear one and more stranger and more with whom we have more difficulties, and then expanding to all sentient beings. And again, especially sometime when we started to feel negative about ourselves, when we started to have some kind of self-loathing or self-hatred or feeling of inadequate and all of that, self-pity or whatever, then again, it is nice to do Tonglen practice for yourself. The object of your Tonglen practice, then you do for yourself, because you need the love and compassions and affections in such situation, in such time, And so then you can do Tonglen for yourself, yeah, and otherwise, then yeah, we can lose our self-confidence, become discouraged and devastated, and very low, So in both cases, what we need is more. We ourselves need more affection, compassion, kindness, love, and so you can do Tonglen in that with yourself. Can be helpful. Again, when you breathe in, you can try to breathe in, all the positive energies of all the enlightened beings of, loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, self-confidence, inner strength. So we can, when you breathe in, so you can visualize that you are breathing in all these qualities inside. And when you breathe out, then you can visualize, imagine breathing out all your problems, all your pain, all your sufferings, and all these unhealthy thoughts, emotions, negativities that are going in our mind. The feeling of unworthiness, unworthiness, the feeling of unworthiness, the feeling of, inadequate, feeling of, what it was bothering us in that moment, emotionally, mentally, what it was bothering us, all of those negative feelings, emotion, thought, that you can think and visualize. We are breathing all of that, as we breathe out, and all the negative karmas that give rise to all those delusions, all those negative emotions or feelings, and the delusions, and so we can again we can try to practice that again. It can be beneficial, helpful for certain individual, for certain persons. I wouldn't say that it would be helpful for everyone all the time, because of course, once we have trained and when we have reached a certain point, and when we have a strong practice of that, then I think I have no doubt that it will be beneficial for everyone. But for those of us, those who have not done this practice on everyday level, then when they try to do, sometimes, depending on your state of mind, depending on how, how well we are able to do and all of that, then sometimes it is effective, sometimes it might not be so as effective as effective it could be. So, but definitely can be very, very beneficial, helpful. So we talk about Tonglen. We also we also talk about where to start with the Tonglen, and I kind of give you a few different example where we can start. Sometimes, yeah, we can do different. As I said, sometimes we can do the 6 realms from the where more suffering, and then where the suffering become more lighter and lighter. Sometimes we can start with someone who is close to us, and then starting stranger enemy. Sometimes we can start with ourselves, and then someone who is close to us, and then uh, stranger enemy. Sometimes if we have difficulty with that, starting with ourselves, sometimes we start with someone who's dear to us, which is more easier. And then after that, we do for ourselves, and then the stranger, and then the enemies. And sometimes we can start with somewhere, where you see the suffering so obvious, outside. It can be human beings, it can be animals, where the pain and suffering is so unbearable that you can feel the compassion, the love so easily. So we can start with that, and then after that, then we can expand to others. So we can start starting point at different, depending on what is more effective to you. Um, Individually, what is most effective. And sometimes something is effective to you at one time, another time you want to find so effective, and if you change to some others, then it might be more effective, more, So also, because, even same meditation, according to our kind of state of mind, moods, and different things, sometimes some meditation were effective at certain time, maybe in certain time it is not as effective, and then if we change a little bit, then again it can be effective. So and then in relation to the Tonglen practice, that one of the important factors is when we kind of imagine and visualize taking the suffering and cause of suffering of others, we really have to feel sincerely, truly, that we're taking, not just thinking I'm just imagining it's not coming, but really convictions, I'm really taking their pain and suffering and the problems and the cause of all those problems. So the stronger that you really feel it, so instead of feeling with your some part of your mind, oh, I'm just imagining, or I'm just kidding, it's not really happening, then your practice is not so strong and effective. But you just really feel with total conviction, you are actually really taking on them, really taking on yourself, not just visualizing. Visualizing, you use that method, but you really are taking on yourself and being joyful that you are able to do that. Feeling rejoicing or joy, being joyful, delightful in being able to take all of that. And same way, when we imagine and visualize giving all our virtues, all our goodness, all our positive excellence, and sending them to others, again, not just thinking that I'm imagining and visualizing, but really as though you are really giving with the conviction, you are really giving them, and they're really receiving them. The stronger that is, the more effective your practice becomes. And then again, rejoicing and feeling delight and joy that you are able to give and that they are able to receive. So those are some of the important factors out of this practice to become it more effective, more genuine, sincerity, to really feel that and if you started to feel fearful because you are taking others' pain and suffering, and as though you are really started to feel their pain and suffering are coming, you should be very joyful and rejoice, because it is now having real effect. Instead of freaking out, you should be very joyful. Now it is working. the meditation is having an effect. You know, that means the practice has, because, you know, if you don't really feel that, then still our practice is not so strong, you know. And so therefore, if we started to feel that, right, it is not a bad sign, it is a good sign. But of course, if it started to bother you, you know, if that fear started to bother you and kind of become obstacles to continue to practice, then again, we have to deal with the fear itself. And then again, you know, thinking, you know, well, I'm just through just practice, I can't just take others' pain and suffering. If that is the case, the Buddha would have already done that for all of us. And we wouldn't have any suffering and pain right now. And so therefore, you know, we experience the suffering, the pain, everything that we experience is a result of our own karma and our own mind. And so it can't come from others. And so therefore, there's no, whether you, it is not that we are going to experience the suffering because we do visualization and that, and we are not going to suffer if we don't do the visualizations or the practice, you know. If we have the karma to experience certain suffering, we will suffer. If we don't have the karma, then just through whether you visualize or not visualize, imagine, not imagine. So therefore, again, through that kind of, by thinking on karma, again, then we try to kind of walk with fear and kind of let go of the fear. And of course, also we can kind of meditate on emptiness, on the fear itself. You know, what is fear that I'm feeling about, you know? What is that fear, you know? Does this a shape? Does this a color? Is this concrete? You know? Is the clarity of the fear is the knowing nature of the fear, you know. So again, if you kind of do that kind of analysis, then again, there's no sense such as concrete kind of fear that we feel. And when you have strong fear, we feel like there is such a strong concrete there, absolute and concrete there. And when we try to do that kind of analysis, again, it started to break down that concreteness. And when we are able to bring that concreteness, then again, we don't have a strong, intense feeling, you know, the feeling started to kind of become more lighter and more kind of dissolve and more weak. And again, we can deal with that. And also another way emphasizing is when you have that fear because you feel, oh, the pain and suffering is now all the others' pain and suffering is ripening on me and coming to me. Instead of focusing on me or I ripening on me, we can visualize our selfish attitude, self-centeredness at the heart of our mind, at the center of our heart, you know. And then you can kind of bring all the suffering and the pain and cause of suffering and then kind of pour on that self-cherishing thoughts and destroying that self-cherishing thought. So instead of taking on yourself, give it to the self-cherishing thought. And if you give all this problem to the self-cherishing thought, all the suffering, all the pain, cause of, instead of giving to yourself, give it to that self-cherishing thought. Again, that could have a different, you know, you might not feel as much fearful. And so again, we can try those different kind of technique in order to deal with that when we feel to that, and again, we try to use those different techniques, and see what is more helpful to each of us individually, One particular method might be more effective, more helpful to another than someone else. So, and that is why we need to do the meditations and try ourselves and to find out what is more effective. And then once we have done and whatever we feel more effective and more reasonable, then we try to continue to do that. If we don't do meditation, if we don't try, then we don't know which method is more effective for us, helpful. And then when we're in crisis, we try to do it, then we do something which is not effective because we have not tried before. So it is important to do those meditations when we are in not crisis. And so then we learn the technique and we know which is more helpful, effective. And so then when there is some problem in crisis and when we apply that we are familiar and that we have practiced, then it becomes more effective, more beneficial. So that is one thing. For certain individual, in certain circumstances, fear could arise, and when we do this practice. And if fear arises, then that is how we try to deal with the fear, with those different meditation technique practices. Another thing that can happen to us when we are doing, again, such a practice of Tonglen, another problem that could arise to certain individual at certain time is, when you do the practice, then again, sometimes we might have too much stronger expectations, okay? So if you see, we want to do Tonglen for someone because someone is going through a very difficult time, challenging time. And when you do the practice, taking on their suffering, their pain, their challenges, their difficulty on us, and trying to give all comfort and solutions and joy and happiness to them, we might have expectation by doing that we will be able to take, sometimes we might have too much unrealistic expectation. By doing this meditation, we will be able to, clear their pain, sufferings, that we will be able to reduce their pain and suffering, that we will be able to take on ourselves and all of that. And then when depending on our practice, depending on our karmic connections, depending on many factors, sometimes we can have some effect, definitely through practice, but sometimes they might not have effect immediately. Their problem might not get solved. Their pain might not be reduced, even after doing the practice long time. Then their problem might not be solved. We might not be able to give them comfort, peace of mind, and joy, whatever, through our practice. But then that shouldn't discourage us from continuing the practice, because it's not giving the kind of the effect immediately now. And so again, if we don't have any expectation of that, we just do the practice, then if there is a change, it's great. Even there is no change at the moment, still it will not discourage us from practicing it, because in long term it helps. In long term, by that practice, by doing that, we are creating a lot of karmic connection, stronger karmic connection with that persons. And through that strong karmic, creating strong karmic connections in long term, then our prayer, our dedications, and our practice can have more stronger impact on them and their experiences. And the main thing, as I mentioned last week and also continue here, the main purpose of doing this practice is to generate and improve our sense of concern, love and compassion and bodhicitta mind. And that is it. And that does help with that, the meditation Tonglen will definitely help in that relationship, in related to that. It will definitely help us to feel, to open our mind more towards others, to have more concern for others, to have more empathy towards others, to have more compassion, love, and bodhicitta mind towards others. And so therefore, that is the main purpose. That is the main purpose of the meditation on the Tonglen. And so therefore, again, even we are unable to affect the other person to whom we are doing, or we are doing for ourselves, even we are not being able to affect it directly, immediately now, that shouldn't discourage us from continuing the practice by knowing the real purpose of doing that practice. And so that's one other thing that we have to keep in our mind. Sometime when we do practice, whether it's a Tonglen or other practice, when we are doing some practice for someone else, we shouldn't have such a high expectation, unrealistic expectations, because that can become obstacles. That become an obstacle in our practice. If we have that kind of unrealistic expectations and when we don't see that kind of effect immediately, then we become discouraged, or we feel, oh, this practice doesn't have any effect, it doesn't help, or it is just a useless, or it is just a superstitious. All kind of those thoughts could arise, and that could act as obstacles in our practice. And so we just do the practice, without any expectations. And if the things happens, that is wonderful. It's like you get a bonus without the expectations, surprise, nice side, surprise bonus, but you don't have any expectation that you're going to get, you are not expecting any bonus there. And so even your companion, your boss, your employee doesn't give you bonus, you are not disappointed and unhappy, because you are not expecting them. And if they do give, you are very happy, great, and even they don't give, you are not disappointed and not unhappy, and because you are not expecting that. But when you are expecting, then that can become a problem, not only in ordinary world, also in our spiritual world with our practice. When we have high expectations, then that can lead us to be disappointed and discouraged, and so on. So that is the practice that we try to do in our meditations on the cushions. It's important to find formal meditating time. Even it is not too. Even we cannot find a long. As I mentioned last time, even 15 minutes a day, but continue is very important to find time and space to do formal sitting meditation practice. And then, of course, we bring that meditation then in our, when we are not on the cushions in our everyday, then we try to bring that again all the time, not just only living at the cushions. Oh. There is a question where it says, when you spoke of different methods on taking on suffering, you suggest that instead of taking it on ourselves, we could take it on self-thought. I couldn't quite hear the word you used. Could you please clarify and expand on this a bit? Yeah, I was saying sometime when we are doing the taking the suffering on ourselves, and if we started to feel overwhelmed by that pain and suffering, because we are feeling, we are receiving all the pain and suffering of others on yourself as we do the practice. If you started to feel too overwhelmed and fearful, then instead of imagining or visualizing or thinking that all the suffering and the pain receiving yourself, you can imagine, think, and visualize all the suffering coming, but destroying your selfish attitude, self-centeredness. So give it to the selfish attitude, self-centeredness, instead of taking on yourself. So give it to your selfish attitude, the self-centeredness. So that was what I was saying. And so when you do that, then again, it can be, less overwhelming or less fearful. So again, it can be for certain persons, for certain individual, and that can be helpful to do that way. Instead of giving to yourself, giving to the selfish attitude, self-centeredness. But if you don't have that kind of feeling of overwhelmingness or being overwhelmed by that or too fearful, then I think it's better trying to take on yourself and thinking, visualizing, imagining that you yourself have really taken on it, that you have really received it. And so I think, I hope maybe that clarified the questions. If doing Tonglen and becoming suicide, feeling helpless to help others, is this just an attachment? My lack of fully understanding, embracing karma, and my lack of fully understanding emptiness? Well, I think feeling sad is not a bad, as long as it's not overwhelming you, I don't think grieving and feeling sad is a negative, when the bodhisattvas, when they think of pain and suffering of others, they do feel sad. They do feel sad. But they are not overwhelmed by that emotion, whether it's grief, whether it's sadness, whatever emotion that is, they are not overwhelmed by that. As long as you have control over that, there's some feeling of sadness, there's some feelings of a little bit of helplessness, but then you are not overwhelmed by that, then I don't think it is a problem. But when you are being overwhelmed by those emotions, then that becomes a problem. Then that can, make us kind of kind of freeze us, and that can put us very down. So I think, and even His Holiness, the Lama, sometimes express, he also sometimes he feel helpless. He says sometimes a lot of people come to him to solve their problems. With a hope and belief that he will be able to clear whatever their problem is, solve their problem is. And so they come with so much high hope, expectation in that. And he says, sometimes he does feel helpless. And then he does when he mentioned many times, when he feels helpless, then he says he do the Tonglen. Meditation, loving kindness, compassion, emptiness, and sometimes he does Tonglen. So those practices. So I think that is one of the things when we feel helpless, because in actual actions we are unable to do much, and so then through the Tonglen practice, then we can, try to do some things. And so yeah, one of the things, again, just to clarify, being a side is not a problem, when we have bodhicitta mind, loving kindness, compassion, that will give you some feeling a little bit of sadness, unbearable pain of others. But when you have a strong foundation of true loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, then definitely, because of your inner strength, as I mentioned before, and courage, you will not be overwhelmed and devastated by that. And as long as we are not overwhelmed by that feeling, I think it's not a problem, or it's nothing. It's not a bad, and sometimes it is helpful to feel the sadness, to have the emotions, different emotions, so then we have better understanding of others people's emotions and pain. So through our own sadness, we understand other people's sadness. Through our own grief, we understand others people's grief better, more deeply, if we don't have those emotions ourselves, sometimes it might be more difficult to feel others, those feelings on more deeper level, Of course, we can imagine what it is like to be, but maybe we might not really be able to feel exactly how it is to be in that state of mind. And so therefore, again, those emotions can help us to feel other people's feeling better, through that, to understand them better, to feel there. And so then we can really feel sense of empathy, concern, love, compassion, bodhicitta on more deeper level, on more profound level, yeah. So I think, I think maybe we will have a 10 minutes break. Okay. So then again, we will continue the verses. So from where, in the next verses that we went through, part of the training in conventional awakening mind. So this is the Tonglen, the main practice in the meditations, to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind. And then in the post meditations, when we are not in formal meditation cushions, but when we are engaged in our different activities throughout the day, and how to train that, how to train during that, in order to, again, to maintain our loving kindness, compassion, the bodhicitta mind, and the practice of Tonglen. How can we maintain? So in the root text where it said concerning the three objects, three poisons, and the three virtues. So in that, in one of the other translation, they are saying there are three objects, three poisons, and three roots of virtues. And again, three objects, three poisons, three seed of virtues. So what it means is, generally in our life, normally, normally in our life, we tend to categorize other human beings, sentient beings, and mainly the human beings, into three categories. Those with whom we can get along well, whether we call it our family, friends, whatever, and those with whom we don't get along well, whether we call it enemy or not, but with people with whom we have more challenges, more difficulties, where we struggle to get along well with them. And then there are others who are neither of them, more, more neutral, like the stranger, where we don't have either of those feelings, yeah. And in relation to that, those are the kind of three objects, and then in relation to that, then when we encounter, when we meet, when we hear about those with whom we have a good relationship, our families, friends, and so forth, with whom we have a good relationship, where we can easy to get along, and where we have a getting along well, then we seem to develop naturally, sense of attachments, worldly love, affections, desire, On other hand, to whom we have difficulties in getting, challenging getting along with them, we tend to have a, aversions, disliking, towards them. The moment you see them, the moment you hear about them, then we tend to have kind of the feeling of aversions, feeling of disliking. In some cases, anger and hatred, And then to those who are more in between, more neutral, neither we have a strong attachments, love, neither we have any disliking or aversions, anger, but we become more indifferent. We become more indifferent towards them. So these are the 3 poisons. That's why I say the 3 poisons. So the poison of attachment, the poisons of anger, and the poison of ignorance. So when we come in object of any object that appear pleasant, attractive, good, we tend to have attachment. Any object that appear to be unpleasant, not good, unattractive, we tend to have disliking and anger. And then the object which are more kind of neutral, neither it appear as good or bad, neither it appear as a pleasant, unpleasant, unattractive. We tend to be more kind of ignorance, not tend to have cultivated, arising the ignorance, and so the indifference and ignorance. So that is how normally we do that. And then the 3 root of the virtues, or the seed or root of the virtues, are the opposite of 3 poisons. That is non-attachment, non-anger, and non-ignorance. The virtues of non-attachment, the virtues of non-anger or non-hatred, and the virtues of no-ignorance. So these are the 3 root of the virtues. So then how do we practice that in relation to that? So basically in our life, especially when we're interacting with others, and sometimes we don't even have to interact directly, sometimes we listen to the news, we read about news, and then again, even though we're not interacting directly, but then on the basis of that, we have an impression of certain people as a good, and then we have more kind of attachment towards them, and we have certain impression of certain people that we hear in the news, we read through, we have impression of that, and we have this feeling of disliking, aversion, anger, and so, and in some cases, maybe we're just indifference, but so whether we are interacting directly, a lot of time when we interact directly, and sometimes even in not interacting directly, so when those emotions arises, and those emotions arises not because we want them to arise, it just natural arises when we encounter certain objects, those different objects. Then in the practice here is when, for example, attachment arises, recognizing that, being aware of that. Oh, I can see my attachments. I can see my attachments arising towards that persons, individuals. Recognizing that. And also recognizing how attachment arises, how we exaggerate the objects or the quality of the objects. How attachment arises, how it blind our mind, when the attachment is strong, then again, our mind become biased and blinded in a way, even that object has some faulties. Due to our attachment, we become blinded and we can't see that faulty nature of that. That is what attachment does. So in that way. And then also when attachment arises, especially when it's strong, it's more noticeable. The attachment, the desire, the craving, when they're strong, again, we're unable to be, our mind is unable to be still, stable, tranquility. And also understanding from our past experiences, how due to attachment and by following those attachments, how we have suffered many times, a lot of disappointment. By following the attachment, how we have lead ourselves into a state of where we become very disappointed, very unhappy. In some cases, that even lead to a lot of resentment, anger, and so forth. The pain that attachment has led us, So remembering that, being aware of that, recognizing that. And through that, then we also recognize there are so many beings in the world who are going through this kind of strong desire, attachment, craving. And through that, how much they are experiencing the suffering pain at the moment, and due to that attachment, how many disappointment and that could lead again in the future because of those attachments and unhappy and miserableness. That so then with our own experience, then we understand others who are having same kind of feelings, experiences, and the pain and suffering due to those negative emotions. And by understanding that, then we try to, think and say, by me experience this attachment, may they never have to experience this attachment themselves. So then we transform something in positive. By me experiencing that, may they do not have to experience this attachment and the suffering of the attachments. May I be able to experience the attachment and suffering of attachments on behalf of all of them, so that they don't have to experience that. And then if we can do Tonglen, then you can think, may all their attachments and the suffering from coming from attachments ripen on myself. And may they be free from the attachment and the suffering of the attachments. So you make that kind of aspirations. And may they have the virtues of non-attachments. And then again, when you breathe out, you can visualize and think, sending all your virtues, all your positive, all the excellent qualities in the form of light, nectars, and giving them the virtues of non-attachments and the joy and happiness due to that non-attachments, the virtue of the non-attachments. So that is how we utilize this line in terms of practice. And again, sometime in our life, again, due to certain cause and conditions, again, when we meet someone, when we hear someone, when we talk about someone, again, aversions, dislike, and anger arises. Again, when that happens, recognizing that, oh, there is a anger arising in me, recognizing that, being aware of that. Also being aware when we are in a state of anger and hatred, how painful it is, how miserable it is. How it completely destroys any kind of peace in our mind. And again, how when we have anger, again, how our mind becomes so, exaggerating. Again, we try to project more negative qualities into the object than that actually there is because of our anger and hatred. Also, being aware how when we have strong anger and hatred, how we become blinded in a way that even that the other person have certain positive qualities while we cannot see that because of our anger and hatred. How we are unable to see any goodness or positive quality in that person, even when they have certain positive qualities and goodness, because of our anger and hatred, we totally kind of become very biased. Our mind becomes totally very biased, blinded, and then we struggles. We have a heart to be able to see that. And again, being aware of that, recognizing that, and how painful it is, and again, with our own experience, we can remember, we can recollect in the past when we have a strong anger, and out of that anger, how we create a lot of problem for ourselves, for others, and brought so much pain and suffering to ourselves and others. By that, with our own experience, then again, we try to feel and recognize all the other people who are having this kind of anger and hatred in their heart. Due to that anger and hatred, how much they are experiencing all this pain, sufferings. How painful it is for them to have that anger and hatred, and how that anger and hatred is going to destroy them. How that anger and hatred is going to make people around them and others disliking them. How that is creating more anger and hatred from other people towards them. And just imagine how it is like to be disliked and anger and hatred by so many people. I mean, we can see with ourselves when you hear someone dislike you. If someone say, "Oh, that person dislike you," that person has a hatred to you. How do you feel it? Our mind would be very disturbed. One person, you hear one person, "Oh, that person dislike you," or that person has a lot of resentment, anger, hatred to you. The moment you hear it, the moment you feel it, is miserable. Imagine hundreds, thousands, millions of people, and you know that they dislike you. You know that they are angry and hate you. Imagine how much pain and suffering that person might be going. And all this is a result of their own anger and hatred again. And so through that, then we try to understand that, and then making a strong aspirations, dedication, prayer, due to all my virtues that I have created in 3 times, myself and others. May that person does not have to experience the anger and the suffering of the anger. May I, by me experiencing the anger myself, may they never have to experience the anger and the consequences of anger. May I be able to experience this anger myself, which I'm going through, on the behalf of them, so they don't have to experience it. And then you can do Tonglen, taking all this anger and the result of anger, and then giving them, as you breathe out, sending and giving them, the virtues of non-anger, loving kindness, compassion, affections, sending them loving kindness, compassion, affections. And then, making a strong prayer, may they never experience the anger and suffering of anger. May they always be possessed and endured by the virtues of non-anger, such as loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta mind. Same things. Again, when you encounter, certain individuals where when we become too indifference, doesn't feel anything, bad, good, indifference. Again, recognizing, oh, I'm feeling indifference. I'm feeling indifference to others. Then again, and due to that indifference, our ignorance is increasing, due to not really understanding the totality of the others being situations. If we really understand the reality of that person's, we will not become too indifferent. We can feel compassion for them. So feeling indifferent is because we don't understand. We don't really understand that person or that sentient being fully, their state of being, their pain, their sufferings. If we really understand that, we will feel compassion, not indifference. And at the moment, we are indifferent because we cannot really understand their suffering, their pain. And so therefore, it gives rise to our ignorance. So due to that ignorance, again, because of the ignorance, then again, it leads to many delusions and more pain and more sufferings. And with that recognizing, being aware of that, recognizing that, and again, with our own experience in the past, due to our ignorance, how much we have suffered ourselves and how much pain and suffering that we have created to others due to ignorance. By that understanding, again, we think everyone who is indifferent and who have that kind of ignorance, how much they are suffering, how much they will be suffering because of their ignorance in the futures. And then again, understanding their pain, their sufferings. And then again, we make a strong prayer, dedications, aspirations. May their ignorance and resolve ignorance be clear. May they be free from all the ignorance. By me experiencing the ignorance, may they be free from the ignorance. May I be able to experience the ignorance on behalf of all sentient beings, so they don't have to experience the ignorance. Then you can do, again, Tonglen visualizations. If you can, taking all their ignorance and consequences of those ignorance on yourself. And then as you can visualize, imagine ascending all your positive virtues, qualities, the wisdom, understanding, and the wisdom, knowledge, and then receiving that. And through that kind of understanding, knowledge, and wisdom, where they have more joy, more happiness, more understanding. So then we make prayer, may they have all the virtues of the non-ignorance, as the wisdom. So we try to, so that is how we try to apply whatever. So this is just an example of giving three poisons in relation to three different objects. This is just a like an example, but we can apply that to any kind of feeling throughout our day. Sometimes we have fear, for example. When we have fear, we recognize we have fear, and then we see others who have a lot of fear, like ourselves. And then, wishing them to be free from all the fear, because it's unpleasant, it's painful. Wishing them to be free from the fear, and instead wishing them to have the virtues of fearlessness. Then if we want to do Tonglen, again, we can do that. Take their fear on ourselves and then give fearlessness. Same thing, sometimes we might have a, sense of inadequate, worthless feelings. Again, recognize that how we are feeling. Oh, I'm feeling self-loathing, self-hatred, or, worthless. Whatever feeling that we are being aware, recognizing that, and again feeling how painful it is when we are in that state of mind, and recognizing we are not only one. There are so many beings who are going through that same, and even worse. And then again, wishing them, may they be free from all these feelings, unhealthy, unhelpful emotions and feeling, And then you can put Tonglen, take on that yourself. Then you can pray, wish, have aspiration for them to have feeling of worthful, self-confidence, self-compassion, love, and so forth, And then again, we can send them all of that as we breathe out. And so we can use that in relation to any of the unhealthy, unhelpful, negative emotions, because we go through those different negative emotions every day, every week, every month. Sometimes those emotions are very strong. Sometimes they are less strong, more lighter. But we go through those different emotions and being aware and recognizing that, and then we use that unhealthy and harmful feelings, emotions, to transform in something positive, to cultivate virtues, sense of understanding of others who have that feelings, emotions, and to feel compassion for them. And then, if we can, then do the Tonglen practice. So, so this is just example. You can apply that to all different, different negative emotion that we might be experiencing, going through, and so in the verse it says the instructions to be followed, in short, is to be mindful of practice in general. So that is the practice that we try to do in general throughout the days, when we are not on the meditation cushions, but even when we are, wherever we are, whatever we are doing, being mindful of those different emotions that arises in ourselves. And once we are aware of that, then we try to, through that awareness, then we try to develop understanding of others who are going through similar and worse emotions, feelings. And then by that understanding, then we try to transform into something positive, to feel compassion for them, and then doing the Tonglen, taking and giving. So that is how. And then it says, by taking those words to heart in all activities. I think it might be slightly different translations in some others. In others, this is more like the, I think this, it seems more accurate to the Tibetan. Train yourself with the verse during all activities. So what it means is, then we try to memorize some of the verses from the Lojongs in here, particularly in relation to the practice of Tonglen. And we memorize them. And once we are memorized throughout the day, whatever activities we are doing, we recite those Tonglen practices, the verses. And so using that verse to remind us the practice so that we can start doing the practice. So as a tool, we use those verses as a tool to remind ourselves so that we can start to reflect, contemplate, and feel and practice. So of course, there are many, many verses that we can kind of, can be beneficial. For example, as I mentioned from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland last time, may the sentient beings' negative karma ripen upon me, may all my virtues ripen upon them. So for example, His Holiness, I think, says he recite this every day, and also he encouraged others to recite that, and then as like Shantideva, like in brief, for the sake of all living beings, may all the harms I have selfishly caused to others descend upon myself, upon me myself, and for those verses, and then you see in Lama Chopa, Guru Yoga, there's a verse where it says, and thus, venerable, compassionate Guru, I seek your blessing that all the karmic debts, obstacles, and suffering of mother beings may without exception ripen upon me right now, and that I may give my happiness and virtues to others, and thereby invest all beings into bliss. So, all of them, some of them, whatever verses you feel more beneficial, and also in one of the Tome Sambos where he says, all sufferings come from wanting your own happiness. Complete awakening arises from the intention to help others. So exchange completely your happiness for the suffering of others. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So there are many, many similar verses in many, many different texts and practices. So we can memorize, whether it's all of them, one of them, whatever you find beneficial, and you can time to time recite that. And the reciting is not just for a like kind of recording, like a parrot reciting it, okay? Just the sound. The reason to recite those words is a tool to remind us and to do the practice. So when we recite it, whether you do digital Tonglen practice or you just simply do a quick, short practice of Tonglen, it should kind of remind us to do that. Or even we can't do the visualization properly, even just making the inspiration, may all other suffering ripen on myself, may all my happiness ripen on themselves. So not just reciting, really feeling that. Really feeling that. And so that is what we try to, thereby the bringing or the practice of Tonglen all the time, throughout the day, throughout the whole day, and throughout the weeks, months, years. And so I think there might be some cautions. Is appreciating nature, the beauty of nature, an object of attachments? Can nature be a positive source in inspiring good virtues? Yeah, I think appreciating nature or the beauty of nature doesn't have to be attachments, appreciating itself, attachments is when we have clinging. Attachment have many qualities, one, when we have attachment, the attachment exaggerate the qualities more than actually there is in that. So that is why one thing. Secondly, attachment always is arises from the ignorance, and attachment has sense of grasping, clinging to the object, not wanting to let it go. So, but someone to appreciate, whether it's nature, beauty of nature, or even the persons or animals or anything, it doesn't have to have that kind of clinging, that kind of a grasping. Someone can appreciate without clinging and grasping. One can appreciate without exaggerating the qualities in the objects. And so therefore, appreciating itself is not an attachment, so as long as we don't have that exaggerations of qualities in our mind when we are appreciating it, as long as we don't have that strong clinging and grasping, then I think it is not a problem and it is not an attachment. And appreciating is good. It is a good appreciating, appreciating someone's kindness, appreciating someone's other sentient being kindness is a positive, it's a virtues, being grateful to others because of the appreciations, thankful is a virtues. And can nature be a positive source of inspiration? Good. Yes, of course, it can be, definitely. Why not? You can use the, the beauty of the nature as making an offering to others, that is virtues. you know, and because of our appreciations to the nature and the beauty of nature, then we have the inspirations and the wish to protect them, you know, and to protect them, not just for ourselves, but for all other sentient beings to enjoy. And that lead us to do certain positive actions to preserve, to protect them. And that is a virtues. And so it can lead to many virtues, definitely. Then there's another questions. I've seen some people who thrive on negative emotion. The more they are lightning rod, the more excited they get. Is this their karma? I think definitely they should have some karmic connections. Even though just because they have karma, they don't have to do that. Even they have the karmic potential, they could still change their such kind of reactive or response, you know. And so, you know, sometimes definitely there is from long perspective, there's karmic potential for them to act in that way. And in some other cases, you know, immediate cause and conditions, you know, cause and conditions, immediate cause and conditions surrounding them, as well as their understanding of the things, you know. Yeah. If I'm ignorant of something, and if people criticize me because I'm not aware I'm ignorance, and so then I can be upset and angry. But, you know, if I'm aware I'm ignorance, you know, and if people say, then I would be more accepting and less less negative in that way. And so, you know, it depends on, you know, previous karma as well as immediate many cause and conditions. Another questions, do both the recipient and the one who is practicing Tonglen benefit karmically in the future? Well, definitely, I do believe that definitely it will benefit both in the futures. You know, even we cannot benefit immediately. You know, in some individual, they might be able to, but depending on many cause and condition. But definitely in long term, definitely that it will benefit both. Definitely, it will benefit oneself. You know, in one. To maintain, to generate, to maintain, to increase our loving kindness, compassion. That definitely, by that, you know, in terms of karma, we create a lot of virtues. Positive karma just by itself, you know, and it leads us closer into enlightenment, you know. And that's one moment of that meditation can purify huge chunk of negative karmas, you know. It's very powerful. So definitely there is a lot of benefit for oneself. And then to the others, the recipient, you know, I think even though in some cases, due to many cause and conditions, we might not be able to benefit them immediately, but definitely in long term, definitely we will be able to benefit more. And it will definitely benefit them. It is almost like that you are like leaving your will to them, you know. So even they don't get the whatever you have left immediately, but in the futures, when you are normal, then they get the will, whatever will you have left behind. Similarly, all this practice and dedications and prayers and virtues, definitely in long term, definitely they will benefit, no doubt. So it will benefit both. So I think with that, I think maybe we can, I think there is one more question. So okay, so we can do the dedication prayers, final dedications. Oh, then I think again, I hope you have been doing the homework each of the week that I have asked. And again, during this 1 week, again, as we just being aware of different negative emotions that could arise any times. I don't think we will have a problem with that, not having any negative emotions during the 1 week, if that is good for you. But I think I have plenty of them to be aware, so again, it doesn't have to be, as I said, just 3 poisons. Of course, there's always these 3 poisons, but also any other negative emotions, especially some of those stronger, harmful negative emotions, and just being more mindful and being more aware with our mind, consciousness, especially when you're those negative emotions, and being aware, and through that, then being aware and recognizing, and then again, try to think of others who are going through similar, and then try to wish them to be free from all those negative emotions, wish them to have the positive emotions, and then if you can do the Tonglen, and even you can't do the Tonglen, you can always wish them to be free. May they experience on myself all those negative emotions, may they be free from those negative emotions. May all my virtues transform into the positive emotion to them. May they receive the virtuous emotions, and so that way. So that is what we can do for 1 week. I think there was something. Can you practice Tonglen for those who have passed away? Yeah, definitely you can do that. Tonglen can do for all sentient beings, and so even those who have passed, they are still sentient beings, and they are somewhere, and so in whatever form, whatever. But so definitely, yeah, and definitely one can do Tonglen. Yeah. Okay. Can we go up? We do the Shanti Devas. Oh, okay. May all beings everywhere plagued by the suffering of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtues of my merit. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with the toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drink. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. And may the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicine become effective and wholesome prayer bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever disease they are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Maybe long life. The wish-granting jewel, wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. And to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who hold the superior moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all sustaining, preserving, spreading mental victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayer, honoring three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.